welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Anne-Marie, I'm kind of excited for a number of reasons, not the least of which is I learned a new word today. I have a new word to add to my vocabulary, and it comes from our guest.
What is your new word?
The new word is panentheist. And what? That's one of those words you read it and you say, God bless you. Because what did I just say?
So what does it mean?
Well, let's find out. We're going to find out from the person who shared it with me for the first time. She's our guest for today. Her name is Kirsten Rudberg, and she's joining us to talk about a whole wide range of things. But we're going to start off with panentheists. Kirsten, hello. First of all, welcome. And second of all, where did that come from?
I don't want to take credit. It came from a couple of classmates of mine in my cohort in seminary. And because I think I grew up overseas, I always blame my parents and say they showed me too much. So I couldn't really pick a religion or a way of worship in the world. But what really spoke to me was panentheism, which is that God is in everything, that everything is conscious, that everything has an intention or is working for the greater good. So I can take no credit where credit is due, my much smarter classmates in school. So, yeah.
I don't know about you, Anne-Marie. I want to give a little credit because she brought it us.
Yeah, it's a great word. How do you say it again?
Panentheist.
Panentheist.
Yeah. It is like a sneeze.
Yes. It is.
Yes.
Panentheist. You couldn't say that with a lisp, could you? Panentheist.
In fact, it even has a joke built into it. Panentheist, God bless you. I mean,
oh my gosh.
Oh.
Brilliant.
Oh my days, Walt. You're on fire.
I love it.
But when I first saw that word, panentheist, I mean, the first thing I reacted to was theist. Do I want that? But then I saw the definition, consciousness and everything. I said, well, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
And I mean, the idea of me believing something that is tied to the word theist kind of scared me for a moment. But once I got past that one, I said, this is pretty cool. Because I didn't know there was a word for that.
Yeah, neither did I.
I mean, did you know? And Anne-Marie, you never heard of it, right? I mean, that was a new word for you.
Yeah, I mean, literally writing it down so I don't forget it either.
Yeah, right.
You guys are fun.
They are. Yeah. Well,
that's because we're panentheists.
That's right.
We should form a club.
The first meeting of the Panentheist Society of the World is now called into session.
We do need a good T-shirt too. Good T-shirt.
That's true. We need a T-shirt and a logo. Yeah. Okay. We'll work on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yes. And, well, actually, what we'll do is leave it to the universe.
Ooh. I like it.
So, all right. We just did a lot of fun things with panentheism, but let's talk about how you got to panentheism, because I mean, there's a whole. First of all, we love stories, and we know that you're a storyteller. It's one of the reasons why I was so intrigued about bringing you onto the program, because we like stories so much. Let's hear your story. How did you get from being Kirsten growing up around the world to panentheism?
Oh gosh, well, I didn't have a choice of growing up overseas. My father worked for a company outside of Chicago that did giant hydroelectric dam and irrigation projects for developing countries. And so that led us to living in Guyana for a while and then in Pakistan. So I really grew up in Pakistan. And, you know, in between all these trips, of course, we went to a lot of different places. My graduation present, if you can believe it, from high school was a trip to Bangladesh, which, you know, isn't everybody's normal idea.
Kind of unusual. Yeah.
Yes. But, you know, Thailand, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, I mean, Kashmir, all these different places. And my parents were really good about taking us out, seeing the culture, the temples, meeting people, just experiencing the world. And I came back to the States. And suddenly I tell everybody it was my first great heartbreak, and I didn't realize I needed therapy until I started seminary. But that I came back from this multicultural world. You know, all the kids in my school were from everywhere you could ever imagine. Nobody cared about skin color, what church you went to, nothing. And then I came back to the middle of Illinois, which I'm sure,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, was
Mhm.
very white. And it was all about suddenly what you wore. Jordache was a big deal then. Izod, bringing in Velveeta lunch slices to your lunch. If you didn't have those, you were kind of a troglodyte that should go live in the corner. And so it was such a stark contrast with the acceptance that I'd had versus what I was experiencing in Illinois. And honestly, it's kind of this growing up overseas was this beautiful time in my life where I didn't have all the social pressures. And I'm endlessly, always trying to find that again. And I use the analogy that I have a sandbox and I want everybody to come in. Come on, let's go play and have a good time. I don't care who you are or what color your skin is, we're going to have a good time. And so I guess all that to say, I kind of have an expansive personality, maybe one that is, I want more friends. Maybe I'm desperate. I could be
No,
desperate.
you're healthy. That's healthy.
Okay, I'm healthy. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. And so really, truly, this panentheism is for me also a very generous way of looking at life and of looking at the natural world and seeing myself as part and parcel of everything kind of creates for me more generosity of spirit, thinking that a stone and a tree and nobody's more special than anyone else. We all are legitimate. We're all supposed to be here and we all perform an important function as far as how this world moves. And I don't know. I mean, if I could, I would invite the stones in the sandbox too, but they don't really do anything but sit there. So,
but they vibrate.
Their loss. That's true. But I don't know if it's too fast for me to see or too slow. Something's getting lost in translation.
I didn't say that we were good at picking up the communication. I just said they vibrated. That's all. End of sentence. But what you're saying is absolutely correct. And I love it. I love that kind of, boy, I mean, I'm kind of envious to have grown up with that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the one hand, we often talk about this a lot, actually. We talk about how going through all the trials and tribulations of life is where we do our best learning. But man, there's something to be said for living in harmony from the moment that you're born. Like, whoa, that just sounds so appealing.
Yeah. It's there were definitely trials and tribulations over in Pakistan because my mother we had lived in Guyana. When she got to Pakistan, she started losing a lot of weight. And so they thought she had a tropical disease and nobody could diagnose it. But what they eventually discovered was it was celiac before everybody knew what celiac was. And so she had to be, they flew her from the Mayo Clinic from Lahore because she'd gotten down to 90 pounds. So all that to say, there were a lot of stressful moments and sorrows and a lot of grief. And, I had to do fourth grade twice because when I came back to the States, I just couldn't adjust. And my whole world had been shattered by being put in this alien world of Illinois. And I did not adjust well. And I'm sure you can imagine that, doing fourth grade twice did not add any shine to my social cachet.
No, not really.
It was made a lot of fun of. And, a lot of humility. I learned a lot of humility. I did better the second time. No, I'm still in fourth grade. I don't know if you guys know that, but I still am. And still, they just will not pass me. But, thank you for that. I wish I could say that those were all amazing days over there, but it was a gift that I didn't understand until I was a lot older. It really took a long time. And also going to seminary, because I went to seminary in Colorado. It's a very liberal seminary. And we had our first quarter or semester, this class on how to deconstruct slavery and racism, which was incredibly challenging and very distressing and very depressing. And I had people in my class and my cohort start weeping at the table because their parents would not allow them to play with the children who were African American in the community. One of them got punished for bringing home a young girl. And they said, if you ever bring her home again, and this woman was weeping at the table. And that was when I think it finally struck me that my childhood was singular and that it was a gift that I could never, ever ever take for granted. And that realization kind of changed my entire life.
Yeah. I think you kind of answered a question for me that was always in the back of my mind. Because I know what it's like to grow up in this country and to live in a country where particularly the racism, but all the different isms, they're all there. It's just that they're up until like the last 20, 30 years, they just were not acknowledged very much.
Yeah.
They just pretend that they aren't there, so you just kind of skip over that stuff, which was very confusing. I often wondered though, like I was saying, what was that like to come into it? Because I knew what it was like to grow up in it, but what was it like to come into it, and how would one deal with coming into it? I think you just kind of answered some of those questions, because that would be confusing.
Yeah.
It'd be very, very confusing.
Absolutely. It did not help that the first day of school, my mom sent us in our Pakistani clothing. So that kind of just set the stage for the rest of the nightmare that was coming.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember her taking the pictures on the front step, and she was so proud of me. I just thought, oh dear, this is where it all went downhill. Because as you can imagine, they look nothing like what everybody else was wearing.
Of course, which is the last thing you want in a public school in the United States. Yeah.
No, it was like I was fresh meat to a pack of rabid wolves. And yeah, I'm glad I did fourth grade twice, because I could figure out what kind of clothes were appropriate to wear.
So it was worthwhile. That's good. I'm glad there was some value that came out of that. Oh my goodness. Yeah. The webs we weave in this world. I didn't know we were going to go down this road. I never know what rabbit hole we're going to go down. I mean, that's part of the nature of the show. We never know what the rabbit hole is going to be. But this was not the one I was expecting. There were a few other possibilities I had ranked higher than this one. Well, that's all right. That's okay. We're willing to go down any rabbit hole and find out where rabbits are living there. I'm curious, Anne-Marie. I mean, I'm describing what it's like being an American, having grown up in America, and then trying to imagine what it's like somebody coming to this country who's ostensibly originally from here, but never really was here until she got here, up until that point in her life. But what's it like from the perspective of someone who grew up in the UK?
Try to remember that far back. My question was very similar. It's like, how did you adjust to that? And I know that I moved towns when I was 11. I even stayed at the same school. That was tough enough. I stayed at the same school with my friends, but just moving to a different town, that totally threw me at 11 years old. I can't imagine flying across the world and starting brand new in a culture that's so different. I mean, I don't think the British and the American culture are quite on a par with, like, it didn't seem to, when I was at school, it didn't seem to matter if you had the right clothes on. It was a school, everybody wore school uniform anyway. It just didn't seem to have those things. But I think we all feel a bit alien at that age anyway. We all feel like we don't fit in. So to come from another country, I just can't imagine.
Yeah.
I think what's it also like for somebody? I mean, you theoretically had American roots. What's it like for somebody who's truly an immigrant coming into the country from a completely different culture and then dealing with that culture shock? We've actually had guests talk about that, but that one's so far beyond my experience that it's hard to imagine it.
Yeah. I think anyone who does that, no matter what country, is probably one of the more braver human beings on the planet.
And one of the stronger ones by the time they're done.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Resilience. Yes.
Yes.
It's a superpower.
It is. I always wondered where superpowers come from. And now I know. Ooh, do I really want to know? Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge. All right. Well, that gives us the background for how you got here and how you got to where you are in your life. But there were a lot of different ways you could have gone, not just with your own career and your own lifestyle and so forth, but with your personal development. You ended up at panentheism, which is my new favorite word, by the way. But you ended up at this idea that everything's alive, everything's conscious, everything's connected. How did you get there from there?
To panentheism?
Well, panentheism, I think, was kind of like an end game. How did you get to the end game from that start? I mean, that's quite a journey to take.
Yeah, I was going to say my mom would be really happy that you called it a career, because she's really doesn't know what I'm doing with my life. So I'll have to just show her this and say, someone call it a career, Mom.
She and most parents, by the way, most parents are still trying to figure out what their kids are doing. I'm just saying, unless they became a doctor, a lawyer, unless they fit one of the traditional categories, that's what everybody was trying to figure out. It has been for generations.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yay. I think that we should all live our lives like that because it's more fun. There's more possibility, and you can use your imagination. So, but as far as your question, one of the things that I've always, of course, I grew up in this multicultural world. I travel all over the world. I see all these things, have all these experiences, come back to the States, am totally shocked and horrified. So I basically spent my junior high years in the library until they did an intervention and kicked me out because I wasn't getting social skills. And I was forbidden from the library. And I remember the first day that I was allowed to actually go out. I was hiding. I was hiding in that library. I was doing this reading competition where in 7th grade, I read 96 books. The second year I read 120. I am a bibliophile. I love books. But I remember the first day.
That's an age group where, just so people who don't live in the U.S. understand, that's an age group where if they can get them to read one book, they feel like they're in victorious area, but to read 96. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was hiding. So, but I remember the first, they forced me to go to recess. I was no longer allowed in the library. And I remember walking into the gym. It was winter and I didn't really have any friends and I hadn't really talked to anyone. I didn't really know anybody. And these 3 girls sitting over on the side of the gym, African-American girls, took me in and we became best friends. And then when I graduated from 8th grade, I was class bookworm. When I graduated from high school, I was class clown. So that should probably tell you a little bit about my evolution.
Wow, that's a transition.
Who knew this could happen? So, but all that to say, I've always loved books. I can disappear into a book any number of ways, mostly comatose because I don't pay attention to the world. However, because I grew up overseas, I think I have been fascinated with fairy tales and myths from all over the world, just desperately. So, I'm in New Mexico right now, and you should see, just the wall of indigenous myths, Hispanic myths. It is just astonishing at the used bookstore. So I always go in and I'm actually teaching a workshop on Wednesday about how to use fairy tale and myth to facilitate your creative process. But Russian myths, grab the book. Oh, Czechoslovakian. I have been just a glutton. It's embarrassing, actually. And I'm fascinated with how humans create meaning and how they figure their world out and how stories evolve over time, depending on, the political or cultural constraints that are happening around their stories. And so the panentheism seemed to me, when I was trying to figure out, because I hated going to seminary and not having a religion, it was very distressing because we had 35 people in my cohort. They all had something, including UU, Lutheran, Presbyterian, all these different faiths. And I had nothing. And I just thought, what speaks to me? And story speaks to me. How humans create meaning speak to me. I love the stories where a tree comes alive and it gives someone advice, or a stone pours water for someone who is desperately dehydrated in the desert. These magical creatures come forth to help the protagonist on their way to succeed, to achieve something. And to me, panentheism was that. I was like, why wouldn't I want to talk to that stone over there? Who knows what it's hiding or what it can give me? And so I don't know, that's a long answer to your question, but that's how I evolved there, probably.
That's a good answer. I like that. You managed in a very short time to cover a very wide breadth of possibilities. That's a skill. That's not easy to do. I'm curious. Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
No, I was just saying, it almost takes you back to your early childhood, because where anything is possible and there's no stigma. A tree can talk, a tree can advise, a rock can give you water. It's just embracing everything.
Yeah, I think it's for me, because I have a really playful spirit. It's for me a way to be adult in our world, which can be so challenging and stressful, but it's a way to be in this world where there's always the possibility of play and imagination and new experience. Because, I'm open to those things. I'm open to the possibility every time I step out the door, unless I'm in a bad mood and I'm super grumpy, then I'm not. But mostly I like to live with the idea that there's possibility every single day. Something magical could happen. So, yeah.
I'm also curious, are you a Joseph Campbell fan?
Oh, yes. Actually, when I give my workshop on Wednesday, I'm going to talk about the hero's journey.
Okay.
First of all, I just think I don't know the level of the students that are coming. So as kind of a background, it's a good architecture to like hang stories on and narratives. So yes, I am. Why, yes.
I can't say I'm real surprised, to be perfectly honest. If you weren't a Joseph Campbell fan, now that would have thrown me. But yeah, based on what you've told me and what you've told us, yeah, I'm not surprised that you're a Campbell fan. I think one of the reasons I thought of Campbell was partly because you were referring to myth, but also partly because Campbell is kind of representative of the last, 50 years, my lifetime, let's just say. Throughout my lifetime, I've seen a transition that has occurred, particularly here in the US, but it's also occurring across the world toward this general idea of panentheism. Not that that's ever been labeled as where it was going. Heck, I didn't even know what the word was until 20 minutes ago. But that's kind of where it's all been pointing to. And Campbell is very much an example of that, because when he first started writing, he was not accepted. He was not believed. He thought he was basically rejected as a fraud and as somebody just to be ignored. And today, he is a major figure in the lives of so many thought leaders today.
Yeah.
I mean, and he still has his critics. I mean, it's not like the critics went away. They're still there. They're still complaining that he's basically a false prophet and all this kind of stuff. But when you'll also look at the fact that you have like Star Wars, George Lucas talking to Joseph Campbell to make sure that he got the myth right.
Yeah.
Like that's just like one little piece right there, but it shows just how deeply the Campbell type way of understanding our existence and our connection to each other and how everything works, that has really grown in my lifetime in ways that I'm still watching the multiplication of it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I always tell everybody that just by virtue of being born, you're born into the hero's journey. And so through the course of your life, you're going to meet allies and helpmates, and then also meet people or things or situations that maybe aren't so good for you or that challenge you. And so what is the goal? Get through these things, navigate. And then if you live long enough, you'll have smaller, like my walking in the Camino was a smaller hero's journey because I had all of the same things happen. My favorite part of the hero's journey is that it's the obligation of the hero to then return to the community and tell their story.
Yes.
So that other people can learn, or if you get treasure or a boon, you return with the treasure and you share it. You share the knowledge, you share whatever it is you've brought back. That to me is the most powerful. And that's what makes a true prophet, right? You come back and you don't keep it. You're not miserly. You don't hoard it. You share the knowledge, you share the treasure and the wealth. And so that's my favorite part. But yes, I love the hero's journey. Obviously, listen to me.
Well, it's our favorite part too, because LOA Today started in 2012 because I didn't understand the law of attraction and I wanted to learn more about it. So I figured I'll start a podcast because I couldn't afford to hire anybody. I couldn't even afford to buy a book, but I could afford to start a podcast and bring experts on. They could teach me, and it worked. It worked great. And then after the first 400 or 500 episodes, I said, well, I don't want to stop. So it kind of expanded. And now ever since then, it has been kind of like what we're talking about here, what you're talking about. Understanding not only what the hero's journey is, but how the hero comes back and tells us what they learned. That's what our guests are. Yeah. I mean, Amory, you've been on the show now for a few years. Out of all those years you've been doing it, isn't that what the entire panoply of guests has been about? They've been on their hero's journey. They're sharing it with us.
There's nuggets of knowledge and good stuff in every single show. You just absorb that knowledge. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And you learn and you grow as part of being a listener and being a host on it. That's like,
without doubt.
It still amazes me. I mean, there are so many people who are just joining on to this little trip that I've been on, where I've been doing this for myself and Anne-Marie's been doing it for herself. We've been doing it together. And then all these other people are listening like, well, this is cool. This is great. I love this.
Well, and I think what's really beautiful about what you're bringing into the world is you're creating a really great space for people to meet each other. So the listener and the guest, people you might not meet in your ordinary life, maybe, you know? And so I just think shows like these create a really gorgeous community, and they actually help to kind of, I'm really hate othering other people. It bothers me. So you're creating this really beautiful space to take away that stigma, to remove the idea that this kind of person is meant to be, you should be scared of them or not welcome them wherever they are and whatever. So that's what I appreciate the most. Yeah.
I've just thought, Walt, this is your sandpit.
It kind of is, isn't it? It kind of is. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me to your sandbox.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I didn't even know I had one before today. I mean, that's pretty cool.
How much stuff are you learning today, Walt? 10 years and it's still going on.
Well, let's see. In the last 27 minutes, quite a bit, actually. Oh, my goodness. And of course, it opens up all kinds of possibilities. Where do we want to go with this? Let's go to the fact that you're the latest hero, Kirsten, joining us today, and you're sharing your hero's journey. So I'm going to really open it as wide as I can possibly open it and say, what part of that journey do you want to share?
Oh, gosh. Oh, that's a big question. You know, I'd love to talk about my Camino experience because it was so singular. And considering that I'm not religious, it really is kind of a wild story.
Well, it's appropriate because I didn't even know what the Camino was 4 years ago. All of a sudden, in the last 4 years, we've had at least a half dozen people who walked the Camino and they got their great Camino story and all that. It's mind blowing how much, the law of attraction, but it's amazing how much that stuff just kind of keeps accelerating. And here you are telling another Camino story. So it fits.
Yeah.
It's
appropriate.
Okay, good. And I'm looking forward to it. I think Anne-Marie is too.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. I mean, I sent you that book on the Camino, didn't I? Walt?
She did.
Deborah. So,
when I changed homes, that was her home warning gift to me. It was great.
Honestly, yeah. The stories I hear of it are just amazing. So bring it on.
Okay. Well, when I graduated from college, I couldn't get anyone to hire me to save my life. And so I got placed in this corporation as a temp. And after about 3 months, someone said, oh, there's this woman who wants to hire you potentially for a position. And I thought, okay, no one else will hire me. So let's check it out. So I opened the door of the conference room, walked in, and there was this one. I looked at her, and this is the first time this has ever happened. I looked at her and I had this instant sense, oh my God, I know you. I've met you before. It was so visceral. And I didn't believe in any of this stuff back then, but it was so powerful. And she said the same thing later. She said it was weird. The second you opened the door, it was like, oh my God, there you are. And there was this clear connection, so much so that when she moved from Illinois to Florida and got a really rare form of Parkinson's disease, where she contracted it and died within 5 years, I quit my entire life where I was living in Portland, Oregon, drove across the US and went down to be with her for 2 months while she had her experimental brain surgery. It's less experimental now, but back then it was very experimental. And it was a 2-month process. It unfortunately did not help her at all. Her Parkinson's was just so aggressive and rare that it really didn't help. And so the next year she passed away. And she left me a little money, which I didn't expect. I'm not religious, but I was dating a gentleman who was Catholic at the time. And he took me to this monastery on their feast day. And the woman sitting right next to me was a carbon copy of Linda, my dear friend, from the jewelry to the hair, everything. And I hadn't made plans to go to seminary or become clergy yet. And afterwards we met and we were talking, and she's clergy, she's Presbyterian clergy. And she said, I think I'm going to walk the Camino next year. And I was like, what's that? I don't know what that is. And she said, oh, it's this walk. And I was so intrigued by it. We had such a great conversation. And then my partner at the time, who was Catholic, said, you don't know what that is? So for Christmas that year, he got me all these guidebooks for fun, just to read and see what was going on. And then a few months later, a dear friend sent me a package and I opened it, and it was this DVD of this movie called The Way, which is this movie about the Camino by Martin Sheen and his son Emilio Estevez.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He said, I just feel like you're supposed to have this movie and watch it. It's so sweet and it's so interesting. You should watch it. And I thought, okay. And I liked it. And I thought, oh, that's really sweet. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then about 2 or 3 months later, I was getting acupuncture, and my acupuncturist said, my mom just walked the Camino and she broke her ankle. And I was like, what? Why? How do you know about this? I don't know about what is going on. And why are all these people bringing this up? So I didn't think anything more about it. And 6 months later, my dear friend, who was cleaning out her mother's study from decades of papers, called me and she said, this is really weird, but I'm mailing you something that I just think you should have. And I don't know why I'm doing it, but you're going to be getting something in the mail. And I said, okay. And I get it a few days later, and it's a Camino walking from the 1960s brochure. And so it's basically this guide for walking from the 1960s. And I thought, what is going on? What is happening here? And so whenever I get kind of stymied by what's happening, I pull a tarot card. And the tarot card I pulled said, you have not been listening to the messages we've been sending. And I just sat on, I wanted any card other than that, because I just sat there on the bed and I thought, there was a lot of cursing. And I just said, are you joking? You want me I don't hike. I don't really walk. I'm not religious, by the way. This is absurd. And this is stupid. And so I mulled it over for a few weeks. But the second I made the decision to do the Camino, I got someone to stay in my house. All this stuff it was like being blown by this fierce wind. Everything opened up. All my concerns were taken care of. So I ended up driving across the US, took a ship from Miami to Barcelona, took 3 trains to southern France, and I walked a route that's really one of the least known routes because I wanted to be intentional. It's known for its solitude and how difficult it is. And there is something to be said for being able to eat 20 croissants a day and not, but in fact, lose weight. It was like the best thing ever. I ended up walking across France up to northern France and then a little bit along the Spanish coast. And I have never been treated, well, France had the worst weather it had in 90 years. Most people quit because it was terrible. It hailed and snowed on me in May. It was insane. I was covered in mud most of the time. I was alone most of the time. And I've never had people be more loving and kind to me in all these small villages. I had to sleep in the French forest one night because all the places closed because the weather was so bad and it wasn't worth it to be open. So I brought my tent and everything and I camped in the forest. It was terrifying. And then the next day I got to this World UNESCO Heritage Site, and at breakfast the next morning, the woman said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm walking the Camino. And she said, alone? And I said, yes. And when I left, she'd packed up a huge thing of food for me to put in my pack. I had so many people do so many wonderful, kind, loving things. I've never been loved more in my entire life. And then I started walking along the Spanish coast and they say, do not do that. And I was like, it's not going to be too hot. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. And then I stopped going to the bathroom because I was so dehydrated. But I had that moment. I was clambering up the side of this very steep hillside with this massively heavy pack. And I had that moment where it was embarrassing because I was like, this is like a really pathetic movie where you just break. I broke and I howled out to the wilderness. Everything came out of me. Wow. Everything. And I was disappointed in myself because I thought I would do it way more elegantly and maybe more intentionally. But no, that's not what happened. And the first thought that came to my mind was, it was so interesting for me. I thought about my partner, and the first thought that came to me was, he will never allow me to quit this Camino. And I thought, whoa, oh my gosh, there's a lot there that I need to unpack. And who am I doing this for anyway? And why am I giving all my energy and power away to someone else? And why do I feel like that's okay? And so I went into the next town spent a few days in bed, then went to Santander, spent a week in bed trying to rehydrate. And then I took the ferry to Plymouth and spent 3 weeks in Cornwall and had the best time of my entire life. Went to Tintagel, Marazion, Newquay, because I know how to say it now. Penzance. I mean, I had the best time. I love Cornwall.
It's so beautiful. So beautiful. I used to live in Devon. I grew up in Devon for a few years. Stunning.
It is. It is. And I went coasteering, which is where you put on a wetsuit and all these strapping young men take you into sea caves and you jump off all these cliffs and all this cool stuff. I love that part of the world. It was just one of the more magical times of my life. And then I took the Queen Mary back to New York. Wow. So it was very, very epic. I also can't get enough of the Queen Mary. Like, I'm ruined forever. That's the only way I'll travel because they give you breakfast in bed. Who doesn't want that? Yeah. Yes,
I love it.
It was amazing. So yeah, I mean, and that trip changed my entire life in ways that I'm still unpacking. Well, I mean, first of all, therapy, I was like, I need to figure out where this thought came from because it was so unconscious. And the fact that it took this breaking open of me on this hillside, I knew it was something that had to be examined and dealt with. And I'm still dealing with it. Engaging with it, I guess. Let's say that. I'm engaging with it. But then it also led me to seminary because I had some experiences on the Camino that were very panentheistic and really inexplicable. Really, you can't explain what happened, but it allowed me to understand that there's a lot more going on in the world than I, with my rational mind, can explain. And so I thought, I want to go to seminary. I want to have a voice in what's going on, the shaping of, because Discover magazine in 1999 had this article that said, I love science, by the way, but that said, this next century, a new religion will be created that really strikes a lot of people and captures the masses. And I thought, if that's going to happen, I want to be part of the conversation. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will be a benevolent overlord, everyone. Okay.
You know that one moment you described, that moment of horror on the Camino, which you said was not terribly elegant. Maybe it wasn't elegant, but my God, look what kind of eloquence it created for you.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
I'm also a screenwriter, and I can't stand, like, this is one of those things. How every horror movie, the person is trying to run away from the monster or the bad guy. Yeah. And you're just like, they're going to trip because this is what happens. And then they trip.
You expect them to run into the hiding place with all the chainsaws hanging from the ceiling. That's kind of what you expect is going to happen.
It's like, it's so boring because you just think this is so basic. Can't you come up with something more interesting? Right. And so I think that's why when I had that moment on the side of that hillside, I thought, oh, Kirsten, like, at least you could have maybe rolled down the hillside, almost gone off a cliff, get hanging from a tree, screaming. Someone could save you. Like, make it a little more interesting, make it a little more provocative. So I was a little disappointed in that, but it absolutely allowed me to understand some of the unconscious things that I was operating under. And I needed that. I love having my hole in the ground like an ostrich. It's like my favorite thing. Obviously, I was hiding in that library. If I could hide in a hole, I would probably do that too. But this forced me to confront something that needed confronting.
You heard in the introductory video that we show at the beginning of the episode, Anne-Marie is a Taya master, which means she's gone through something called the Taya boot camp. Taya stands for Trust Your Abundance, put on by a friend of ours named David Strickle. And when you go through the Taya boot camp and you do become a Taya master, you go through exactly that kind of thing. I mean, I went through it also. For me, Anne-Marie, it was in the very first module. I don't know where it was for you. It's always different for every person, but there's always that one moment where you just do this massive crash and burn and it's completely unavoidable and it's part of the course, which kind of pisses you off, really.
Yes, mine was I started off great. Yeah, I've got this. This is fine. There's not really any bad stuff in my life. And then, oh my God, it was just down for a long time. It was one of the hardest things. But when you've gone through it, the elation and the freedom, it's so worth it. And then that, I was also doing it while going through the menopause. That's even less fun. But just doing that, and I think that's with the Camino is that confronts you. That's what you get. It's that magic of, hi, you can't run anymore. You're not tripping over. I'm tripping you up. And that's the beauty of it. And it's that magic space to do it. And it's always, from what I gather from people, it's like the Camino supports you through it.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
You wouldn't get that if you were just in the street.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it was something that for me, since most people quit walking, I needed to do it alone because I'm sort of a contemplative at heart. And there's something really magical about waking up every day and you brush your teeth, put your hair back in a ponytail, put your shoes on, put your pack on, and you walk. End of the day, eat dinner, brush your teeth, go to sleep. And there's something so contemplative about that. Having the same movement every day, it really takes you out of the ordinary world. Like you're in this liminal space that doesn't really exist. I'll never forget. I mean, I was walking through this French forest and alone, always alone. And it was up and down these kind of mountains or hills. And I was feeling the solitude. There'd been a forest fire that had gone through. So some of the trunks were charred and blasted, had exploded. So there was a great feeling of this place had been logged, it had been burned, but there were still trees. So there's a sense of just being in an otherworldly landscape. And I come to the crest, and there's a big open, and I look over, and I've been alone for multiple hours. And in the middle of nowhere are these two fancy sport cars, a group of like 6 or 8 people sitting at this picnic table, drinking Dom Perignon with like a whole picnic thing laid out. I felt like Alice in Wonderland. And they were like, come drink some champagne, like come have fun with us. And I thought, good Lord, I'm so dehydrated. I would probably die if I drank that champagne. But it was one of the more surreal experiences I've ever had in my life. Because you just don't expect that going through kind of a ravaged landscape. I have many other experiences like that. Just people hanging out of their, windows that are bedecked with these gorgeous window boxes full of flowers. And they're like, bonjour, bonjour, yelling at me. And finally, after walking for 2 months in France, I sort of understood French a little bit. In the middle of this tiny village, that I encountered this man who looked like he was dressed for a Mongolian winter. I mean, he had like the whole hat, everything. And he came up and he was like 85 years old. And he was so excited that I was walking the Camino. He just started talking so quickly, asking me all these questions. And I tried to answer him in my broken French. I don't know if we made any sense to each other, but he had the biggest smile on his face. It made his day and mine too, because we had the encounter. And it was so beautiful. And I always think about it and wonder what he's doing, if he's still around. But even though we couldn't speak each other's languages, that smile, that love was there, that appreciation. And it was absolutely magical.
Wow. Yeah.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really depressing to come back to my regular life. I just have to tell you, I needed more therapy.
One of the most amazing themes that keeps playing out over and over again here on the program is we get these heroes. I love that's the day's term. We're going to call them heroes from now on. We have these heroes who come onto the show and they tell us their journeys of heroism. And in the course of those journeys, they go through hell and back. Mm-hmm. And to a person, I don't think I've ever heard a single one say, I really didn't get anything out of that. They all talk about how they wouldn't necessarily want to go through it again. In many cases, the stuff is so horrific that there's no way anyone in their right mind would ever go through it again. But they would never trade it in. It was like the best thing that ever happened to them. And I remember the first time that concept was expressed to me. It was expressed by one of my good friends, another co-host, Joel Elston. He told me about it early on in the podcast, one of the first few years of the the podcast, and he's talking to me, and I'm thinking to myself, up until now we've been connecting real well, but right now I think you're just absolutely crazy. I think you're insane. What the hell are you talking about? I couldn't grasp it. How could that be? How could you possibly go through the worst horrors of your life and say it was the best thing that ever happened? I've since then come to appreciate, yeah, it really is. But that's one of those things that's on the face of it. It just sounds crazy. I mean, it does.
Yeah. This falls under, it's really great that we can't see the future, because we would not go towards those things that can shape us and mold us. Or, I always use the word clarify. How you make ghee, you clarify the butter so that it's healthier, I guess. If we could see the future, we wouldn't go through the struggle. We would avoid it at all costs, and to our detriment. Because
personally, I clarify the butter just because I like it better with the lobster, but that's another thing entirely.
It is delicious. It is delicious.
But there are a lot of reasons for clarifying. And they're going to be, this is the part that took me the longest time to understand. Once I got it. There are going to be different reasons for everybody. Everybody has different things to clarify.
Yeah.
That's why it's so hard to understand, because everybody's clarification is different.
Yeah. Everybody's lessons are going to be different depending on what needs to be adjusted, I guess. I always look at it as, because I did the Camino, I went to seminary, and, now I have all these projects I'm working on that are really kind of social justice oriented, but also about engendering community and belonging. And I might never have done that, even gone to seminary, if I hadn't walked the Camino. And so really, we have these moments in our lives, I call them these kind of cruxes, where you have this experience and so many other things spin off of it, kind of using a planet as a gravity, the gravity, if you're in a spacecraft, using it to boost the speed or whatever. These experiences are these seminal points in our lives that hopefully shoot us off in the direction of helping other people on our life path, being more authentic, having more integrity. They might be painful and exhausting, but we need them.
You brought up we're going to do a really strange connection thing here. Okay, I'm just saying, just kind of giving you a little forewarning about this. But you mentioned gravity. You mentioned how you can use a planet to accelerate a spaceship and that kind of thing, and that's true. You can do all those things. One of the things about gravity that's really fascinating is that no one can say what it is. I mean, we all can describe it. We can describe the effect of it, but physicists don't even know what it is. They just know that you got this big mass, you got a gravity. That's about all they can really say about it, which kind of leaves a lot of room for speculation. I think of it from our, excuse me for using the word, panentheistic viewpoint. Everything is conscious, everything is connected. So I say to myself, all right, if I want to understand gravity from that viewpoint, how am I going to understand it? And I've come up with a number of different answers. I'm curious to know, Kirsten, what your answer is. If you are faced with the idea of trying to explain gravity from the point of view of what you believe spiritually, how would you go about explaining that? How would you describe that?
I see you're ending this with an easy question that anyone could answer.
I do my best.
And I'm up for the challenge. I do have to say that, I read a lot of science magazines, as I've stated, and one just recently came out that posited gravity doesn't even exist. It's not even something that's actually real. Yeah. And so I'm coming from that standpoint, but also I'm coming from another theoretical paper that came out a few years ago that said mass doesn't exist. It's an illusion. So basically what we see is really information. And so at the beginning, when there was the Big Bang or whatever started this universe, there wasn't any mass. It's literally information. And so what does that look like? So I'm coming from that kind of standpoint. Does that throw a wrench in your question?
Actually, it sounds more like you've changed the Big Bang into the Big Meow.
Ooh.
I've got an answer to that though, Walt.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Why do you have to understand it? You just have to trust it.
Ooh. I like the answer. Well,
He's
there's
so
one thing I
different.
don't like about the answer. The reason I raised the question is it makes for a fun conversation. But other
Oh,
than that,
yeah.
I love the answer.
Oh, well, I just scuppered that one. Sorry.
No, but seriously, that's one of the fun things is taking these various concepts that science has kind of reached their threshold on, because there's always a current threshold. How far does science
Mhm.
understand things, right?
Yeah.
And gravity is certainly one of those things that it's kind of like at or beyond the threshold of what science currently understands. So when you reach that threshold, what do you do with it? I find that to be really important because that's where the true scientific theorizing comes from. It comes
Yeah.
from that threshold. It comes from that space beyond what science already knows. Otherwise, there'd be no point to theorize, which would be another
Yeah.
way of saying there'd be no point to do science. Science is about expanding boundaries, expanding knowledge, expanding horizons. So you have to be willing to dive into, well, what the frig is gravity anyway? Or, the various kinds of questions you can explore. And what better way to do it than through your spiritual or metaphysical foundation? Which is why I asked my question in the first place. Now, how's that for a long-winded explanation to justify something that was really in no need of justification, as Anne-Marie just pointed out?
Can you spell all that?
No. Nor am I about to try.
I love that because, I really do think before I went to seminary, I always used to think, oh my gosh, I need to unite science and religion, right? I need to do it. Now, there's already a lot of physicists who are kind of dabbling or engaging in that. People who kind of believe in a larger power or a larger force, and they're trying to reconcile, these two seemingly disparate methodologies. And I think, in the middle is the exciting place, that threshold that you're talking about, that liminal space, where Joker's wild. Any possibility, the imagination can just run riot as long as you can maybe get the math. But if you're talking about religion and spirituality, that's ephemeral. It's, unless you have a direct experience or nobody can really quantify that with math or with a paper or what have you. And so how do we marry these two disciplines? Religion, where everything is kind of subjective, and then math, science, physics, biology, where many people can agree on observations. And so that central place where they meet is very exciting. And I think that as time goes on, we're finding more, I would say theories, words, the braver among the more scientists who are talking about this stuff, we're finding some common ground where we can and it's all in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, which is a really exciting, I think, frontier. Honestly, just with the way that indigenous societies are saying, oh yeah, of course the plants talk to us. It's like all vibration. Of course, they're telling us how to create ayahuasca, which is this complicated blend to create an entheogen that helps people expand their horizons. It's a plant medicine. They've already been living this and understanding that everything is one. Nothing is separate, and that everything communicates. We just forgot it in our Western world or ignored it because it was more convenient. Because how do you make money? If you separate things out and say, oh, copper or this, we can mine this land for gold, and you extract, because money is really your God, you then aren't having a conversation with the land and the animals, and you're more willing to just go in and destroy habitats or pollute streams if you are just totally devoid of understanding that everything is one. Does that make any sense?
I understand what you're saying. To me, one of the most fascinating and most enthusiastically exciting things about this threshold that we're talking about is that it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's happening now. It's happening at an accelerated pace. And the dichotomy you just described is disappearing really fast.
Yes.
It's like it's melting away. It's eroding away. So what we might have at one point described as what you described, this world of the West being, separated from the spirituality, all like that. That's gone. It exists in people's memories, so they talk about it a lot, but it actually doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. It's in and both the West and the East are kind of like trying to come to grips with, well, where did it go? We had this really cool polarity going on, and it's gone. We don't know what to do without it. That's what I see going on right now. And to me, that's exciting because I know, partly from doing the show, but I know that when that happens, that's when the coolest stuff happens. Because once all those artificial boundaries have melted away, which is exactly what's happening, something new comes out of it. Something that we can't even perhaps begin to understand what it is yet. We're starting to see like the outlines of it. You mentioned money, for instance. I made a comment on the show about 4 years ago, I think it was. It was in the middle of the pandemic. I made the comment that, of course, the pandemic happens in 2020. 3 months before the pandemic hits in March, I start the year off by having a little fun with 2020. 2020 is what we use to describe normal vision, right? So I said, well, 2020 is going to be the year of clarity. We're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff about ourselves. I had no idea what was coming. I had no idea how accurate I was going to be about that. But it was true. That's exactly what happened. We learned a whole ton about ourselves by going through the pandemic. Another thing that I made a comment on was, and I don't even know where this one came from. I can't tell you what the logical sequence was that led up to this. But at one point, I made the comment that in 10 years, now this is 2020, so we're looking at 2030. In 10 years, we're going to think about money so completely differently that I can't even describe to you how different it's going to be. I can't tell you how it's going to play out, but I know for a fact, and by the way, I've studied monetary policy, so I have some background there. I know for a fact that the way we were thinking about it in 2020 and the way we're going to think about it in 2030 are going to be so different that it's almost going to be like different universes. Now we're almost halfway there, and I can start to see the outlines of it already. I'm sure you can too. But if you had asked me in 2020 to describe those outlines, I would have said, well, I don't know. That's the kind of time we're living in, where things are transitioning so fast. And we're all just trying to help. I'm trying to keep up. I don't know what to do. That's where we're at right now. So science, religion, spirituality, those are just three of the elements that are involved. Social justice issues, political issues. There's a piece of it right there. The entertainment world, the news world. You take all of these things. It's going on everywhere, all at the same time. And everyone's trying to make sense out of it, saying, what? What? That's the universal reaction. What is going on?
Well, this is the world's journey on the Camino. We're having that breakdown.
That's right. That's exactly what it is.
I love that. I love that. That's totally right. You're absolutely right, Anne-Marie. Yeah.
And isn't it cool?
It is. It is. It's, I mean, we're all collectively taking an adventure together, and who knows where it's going to end up. And that's kind of exciting.
I'm thinking about a lyric from an old song. I can't think what the name of the band was. It was a Southern rock band, but the lyric is "The road goes on forever."
Oh,
and that's exactly what this is. I mean, it seems like we're expanding onto this new thing, and we don't know where it's going to go. It's useful to remember it never stops going.
Yeah.
It continues.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how long we're in this particular plane of existence. It continues anyway.
Yeah.
The road goes on forever. And by the way, doesn't end for us either. Our road continues too. The whole thing is continuous. It goes on forever. It never stops. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. There's another lyric. Exact same meaning.
You should have a never-ending show, by the way, I think.
I think we kind of do, really.
That's true. That's true.
Well, it's not entirely true, because I do kind of draw a line at an hour, but then I start
okay.
an hour.
Oh, I meant like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, someone would have to sleep every once in a while, but I think you could really have something there.
I don't know if I could honestly do that.
Okay, fair.
Just because I could see myself like curl up in a ball after a while, because I'd have so much positive input from it.
Oh, yeah.
We need that negativity at times.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
if we don't have that polar opposite thing going on, we get confused. If I just had this huge energy surge all the time, I probably just curl up in a ball. I couldn't handle it.
I think that's fair. That's totally fair. I didn't consider that part, but I think you're totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by the way, there's a lot for me to say that. 5 years ago, I would have said, Walter, you nuts. But now, yeah. Well, I didn't know where this was going. I don't think Anne-Marie knew where this was going, but I like where it went. This is really fun.
Yeah, we got a little bit of everything in there.
Yeah, we really did. There are 2 things we need to find out first, okay, before we say goodbye for today. Maybe we can get you back another time. But first one is somebody wants to carry on the conversation with you. How do they find you?
They can go to my website, bitesizedblessings.com, and it's BYTE. And it's really about my podcast, but you can find more information about me, my books that I've written, other projects that I'm working on. And there's an email there, so they can absolutely reach out to me. Also, Facebook and Instagram. But the important thing is bite-sized because it's BYTE. So yeah.
I love the digital piece of it too. I like that.
Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. Second thing I got to do, and this is going to be so easy today. I do this as a regular thing, but today is going to be so freaking easy. I noted a few years ago that guests come onto the program and I visit other people on others' programs and people are publishing stuff on blogs and social media and so forth and putting out all this content and all this useful information and so forth. And I noticed we weren't getting a lot of credit for it. In fact, we weren't getting any credit for it unless we were interacting with somebody. So I decided to make it a practice to say on behalf of those people that you've never met, you've never seen, you never will meet, you never will see, you've been giving this content to and not seeing what they've been doing with it, but they've been getting advantage out of it and they've been getting help from it. On their behalf, thank you, Kirsten, for what you're doing.
Oh my gosh.
Because you're making a difference in this world.
Oh, well, I'm trying. I'm tired a lot, but I am trying.
I know that feeling.
Thanks, you guys. This was really, really fun. Thank you.
It really was.
And Anne-Marie knows where I go last with this. This is going to be in one sense, this is going to be easy. In another sense, this is going to be hard. I don't know where you're going to pick from, Anne-Marie, but I always go to my co-host to summarize, Kirsten. I always ask my co-host to pick, like, what's the one thing that ties the whole conversation for you together? I'm curious to see what Anne-Marie is going to say today. So, Anne-Marie, what's that one thing that you want to grab on?
Okay, I've got a visualization in my head. So I've got a road with lots of turns. Okay, so I see Kirsten on this really positive road, but actually there's all these turns and there's all these twists and you've just embraced them and it's taken them with such a positive outlook and just embracing those twists and turns. And that's kind of what I took from that. And see the signs. If somebody's saying Camino 700 times in a month, go to the Camino.
Yes. I'm totally with you on that one. One of these days I'm going to have to walk a Camino because, I mean, my goodness, it's amazing how often that concept comes up. And it's scary how it's talk about acceleration. That's accelerating. The frequency of Camino on this show is accelerating. You see it too?
I love that.
Wow. Yeah. That's scary, by the way. Kirsten, this has been fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We wish you, all of the best possible journeys as your path continues.
Thank you. Thank you. And this was the most fun I've had all day. I just want to let you know I loved every minute.
Well, that means we succeeded. We had one more daily dose of happy.
True story.
There we go. So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.